Okay, this is a 2003 Suburban, and I'm trying to replace the rear expansion valve for the air conditioning system. Now, I found several resources so far to get to this point. Basically, you have to remove several trim pieces, starting with this piece that goes across the bottom, then a piece that goes across the top, and a piece that comes down the side here, and a similar piece on the front. They're all really easy to pull up. They just connect with these little clips. Not a problem. But get into pulling the cover off the heater core and the evaporator, which is this piece here. There's several of these small screws all around the perimeter, and a couple deep in these little wells here. There's one, and then you can't really see it very well. There it is. The hardest one, actually, however, was this little puppy right here. Just because it's difficult to get a driver underneath it. And there are two more over here, and a couple on the bottom on that end, but they're not nearly as difficult to get to. But now I've run into an issue. This being a 2003, there's some differences in the evaporator and its expansion valve in either the 2001 or the 2004. I don't know why they keep changing the design. But you'll notice the expansion valve is back there in the corner, and it's going to be nigh on impossible to get to it where it sits. So I want to take this piece out. But you can see up here in the top, it's covered quite a ways. Down here in the bottom, it's sitting in a well. In order to pry that out, you actually have to remove the backside. Now, in order to remove the backside, you've got to get the screws that you cannot get to with the whole unit sitting in the truck. To remove it, there are two bolts. Well, they're actually studs sticking down from inside the plastic housing here. They come out at the bottom of the truck. And I've already removed one of the nuts. But you'll see this one right here in the center next to the two larger nipples that are for the heater hoses. I started to back that nut off, and it got down to a little bit of rust, and the whole stud started to turn. And you can't see the damage I've done to it since then on this video, but I have applied locking pliers to the end of that stud in an attempt to ratchet it off with a wrench and hold the stud in place. And unfortunately, that nut is stuck on there so tight that even with the most tight I can get my locking pliers, the stud still rotates. So here's why. You can see a little bump there in between where the two heater pipes go down. That is where the top of the stud is. The top of the stud is simply embedded in that plastic. Once you've turned it even a little bit, That's not going anywhere. So if you're going to get into this job, be prepared. One, use some kind of anti-seize or some kind of penetrating oil to loosen up those nuts before you get started. Be prepared to use a very small socket. I should not have used locking pliers on it first. I should have tried the socket first. No guarantee that would have worked, but try that first because you can't try it second. You will destroy those that hexagon shape with the locking pliers if they fail. So what I'm going to end up having to do is grab a Dremel and cut off that stud below between the body metal and the nut itself. And then when I'm done, I'm going to have to cut off that plastic bubble that the head of the stud is embedded in, and I'm going to have to get the assistance of someone, and we're going to have to replace that stud with a standard bolt and nut, and probably I'll use a washer head bolt, but it'll still require the assistance of another person. That's why they use the studs in the first place, so one man can do the whole job. And I'll admit to something here right now. I'd done some research on this job, but I had not done nearly enough, and I wouldn't have realized I could even get this far without trying to take that nut off if I had seen some of the videos I've already seen now in the meantime. But I got to the point where I couldn't get that nut off before I ever opened this case. If you get into this job, if you need to replace either the heater core or the evaporator, I strongly suspect you have to pull this unit out of the truck, which means those two nuts on those two studs will have to be pulled. If there's any rust on them whatsoever, I guarantee you the stud will turn. So be prepared.